Hi, everybody. I'm Vicki from Common Sense Media, and this month we are highlighting the contributions of our Hispanic and Latino communities. Our guest today couldn't be more perfect. She comes to us with a rich history and will share some important tips on what parents can do to help their kids build connections to the stories they read. Roni Capin Rivera-Ashford is an internationally award-winning author of several bilingual books like My Nana's Remedies, My Tata's Remedies, It's Monsoon Day, and Raulito, her latest book that talks about the many contributions of Arizona's first Latino governor, Raul Castro. Many of you might recognize her also as the author of the companion book to the Academy Award-winning movie Coco. Welcome to our live session, Roni.
Thank you so much, Vicki. I'm delighted to be here with you today and with this amazing audience that is tuning in to Common Sense. What a wonderful program. And I have many years of sharing with my students from, I would say, pre-K through college. I've taught at many different levels, and I have enjoyed teaching the youngsters how to read and now writing books for them, which I started when I was a teacher.
Well, we are so delighted to have you here and excited for you to share all of those experiences. Also, the experiences you have of growing up near the Arizona-Mexico border. So for all of you out there, sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, and also bring your little ones to the screen because I think we have a special surprise from Roni. Well, not so much a surprise. I'm just going to give you a little hint. She is going to be sharing part of her books with us. So it will be a whole family affair. So with that, I'd love to begin with you, Roni, just giving us just some background, a little snapshot of what it was like for you growing up in a multicultural and bilingual environment.
Well, thank you for this opportunity, Vicki. And it was a wonderful experience growing up on the United States-Arizona border. I grew up right on La Frontera, which we called that we would go back and forth to what we called across the line back then, because in those days there was a lot of freedom to go back and forth. And in school, there were so many of us that were all different, and we all spoke English and Spanish. And today I have to say that that is one of my greatest gifts, is being bilingual and multicultural, learning from people of all walks of life and learning how to respect each other. Respect each other. And I remember going into my girlfriend's homes because I grew up Jewish, and yet I also grew up bilingual, or maybe you could say trilingual, because I learned a little bit of Yiddish. I spoke Spanish and English since I was born, and many people think I'm Mexicana porque hablo el español. And it's just wonderful to go into someone else's home and learn and enjoy the foods and the music and their religious traditions that were different than mine. And today, those are treasures for me, is knowing that we are all one race, the human race, and we all have different qualities as individual people and different cultures, and that we can learn from each other.
Yeah, I mean, that is so beautifully said. And when we talk about our backgrounds and what it means to be Latina, it really means to embrace that heritage that you have grown up with and that you've surrounded yourself with and that has shaped you into the person you are today and those values that you carry with you. Um, I know family first is a big one for you. And just like you said, embracing our differences, our similarities, but as you mentioned, being one human race and bringing the beauty of our different experiences and backgrounds to share with one another. So talking about race and representation, and we're hearing a lot about that right now
Yes.
in, everywhere, and especially in schools. And, when I was growing up, I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me in books. And we know that's so important. And we know that it's so important for their self-esteem, to form their identities. It's so important for our kids to see themselves represented. And speak to me a little bit about when you were a bilingual teacher and the need that you saw for bilingual books and also bicultural books.
Yes. Well, when I was teaching my students how to read in first and second grade, what I realized was that the most important thing was learning how to read for my students. And you cannot learn how to read in a language that you don't know how to speak and that you cannot identify with. So what I realized that the key here was to teach each child to read in their home language or in their dominant language. And once you learn how to read, reading is a skill. And what's really important, all of you out there to know, is that skills transfer. So once you learn how to read, when you learn another language, you're going to already know how to read that language. And that it's like riding a bike, right? And once you know how to ride a bike, if you know how to ride a bike with training wheels, you take the training wheels off and you might be a little wobbly, but you'll get it. And then you can ride a regular two-wheel bike. You can ride a racing bike that has gears. So it's similar to that. And at that time, there were not enough books that were in English and Spanish that had the same message and that were culturally relevant, that the students, like I remember Clifford the Red Dog. I mean, that's a very sweet book and I love it, but it's not something that for Latino students like Clifford el Perro Rojo, like it just doesn't touch your heart. You know, there's nothing endearing about it in that respect. So I decided to write a story that actually came to me in Spanish first. And it's my first book that I got published many years later, because getting published is a whole other story. And I encourage all of you families and parents out there to start writing some stories with your children. Write your family story. And nowadays, online, you can even produce and publish your own book. Those of you that are artistic, you can do the illustrations, and you could write stories about the past, about stories that your grandparents or your ancestors told you, so that they don't get lost. And that's what I did in this book, My Nana's Remedies, or Los Remedios de mi Nana. And it's very simple. The story is very simple, but it talks about remedies of healing and different kinds of teas that the grandmother would make for them to feel better when they had a headache or a sore throat or a stomach ache. So that's what I would recommend.
I would love it if you could read maybe your favorite part of that story to us. And I know you add things as you're reading because you like to bring your stories to life. You know that it's important for kids to make the connection to real life, to something tangible, something that they can relate to or touch or smell or feel. So can you show us an example of how you might bring a story to life by sharing part of your book with us, please?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I picked a couple of pages here, and this is the page where, toward the end of the story, where the little girl and her grandmother are together. And I think you might understand that one of the details that I love as a teacher, especially working with young children, is I love to rhyme. So here it says, "How lucky I am to have such a special Nana. She is my very own personal healer." And then the next page, it says, "Whenever I don't feel well, my Nana is always at my side. I'll kiss it and make it go away. Then you can go out and play." And then it ends with, "And that's what my Nana will always say." And this is a phrase that I translated into English from Spanish. And it is a magical healing phrase that's been around in Spanish-speaking countries for hundreds of years. So I use that, and this book talks about chamomile tea and cinnamon tea and rosemary and mint tea. So I just want to show you all that, you can also go out in your garden or go to a botanical garden. And this is rosemary. It's fresh rosemary. Here's some fresh mint. Oh, and they smell so wonderful too. And you can together make some tea, which is healing. It's soothing. It's something to talk about and do together. And then I have some cinnamon sticks here, and that always smells good. And then we put it all together and wrap it with some satin ribbon and make a little herb bouquet. And this is something you could put in a drawer. So it's like a sachet. You can hang it in your car. There are just so many things we can do to bring stories to life. And I really believe that by making it an interactive activity where we use all of our five senses, our smell, our touch, our taste, our hearing. So I have another book that's about the desert monsoons, and you can bring music and sounds into it. And here's a rain stick, right? And at home, you could make a rain stick just out of a cardboard. I mean, would be a tiny one. This is a toilet paper roll, but you could use the paper towel roll and cover one side with saran wrap and put a rubber band around it to hold it. And before you do that, you want to make some holes in here that you're going to put toothpicks in. And then you put either little pebbles or rice or beans, and then cover the other side, and you have a little homemade rain stick. So there are so many things. And, if we can't think of how to do it nowadays, guess what? Google it. That's the word, right? Google it on your computer. And so that's what I have for those books. I'll give you a chance to ask me another question, Vicki, and then we can go on to some other books.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us think, oh, we have to go to school to learn how to write or be an author. But you bring up a really good point. Share your stories. Leave your stories behind. As a Latino woman growing up in a very multicultural family, that was one of the best times that we can remember, sitting down with my abuelita and her storytelling. It would have been so great for those to be documented. I have some of them on video, and I think you just gave me a really great idea. I think maybe documenting that for future generations is going to be amazing, because our stories need to live on. And as you mentioned, everyone has a story, and it's so important to tell our story, and also to bring them to life. As a teacher, all of those experiences also stay with students. So then maybe the next time they smell rosemary, they remember the story, and that all ties to their literacy development. And so all of those connections that one can make through stories, and bringing them to life with other, props or materials, as you've shared today, also just strengthen those connections and can increase their literacy. And we know that reading is fundamental for children. So yeah, anytime you can tie in real life to a story, you're going to make those connections with your kids. Now tell me about your... go ahead.
I just wanted to say that besides stories, which are so important, some of us it's stories of where we live. Some of us it's stories of how our ancestors got to the United States or got to the place where they're living now. But also we can include recipes. We could include like what are some of our different foods, and in a classroom, that's great. In families, in a neighborhood, if you have a neighborhood group of friends and families, that you could do foods, right? And then there's music and the different kinds of music. So there are so many different things that we can share and put them in writing, take pictures, create them so that they are left for the next generation.
Mm-hmm. And we can also celebrate a lot of the traditions that we might celebrate, holidays. You know, I know one of your books talks about a holiday. I think, is it your monsoon? Is it the hip hip hooray?
Hip hip hooray, it's Monsoon Day.
Mm-hmm.
And that book talks about El Día de San Juan, which is that is the day that is for rain, June 24th. Saint John the Baptist is the patron saint of rain or water. And that's the day that in the desert, in the Sonoran Desert, that the monsoon rains used to begin. Now with global warming, that's changed a little bit. But this is the Monsoon Book, Hip Hip Hooray, it's Monsoon Day, or Ajua Ya Llegó el Chubasco. And I'd like to read you one little paragraph from, I mean, this is a science book, really. And at the end of the book, at the end of each one of my bilingual books, there are learning glossaries with extended information for parents to share with their children about like the different plants and what they're used for and where they grow. The Monsoon Book has a map of where monsoons happen, and it talks about the plants and the animals of the desert. Here's something that Tata says, and Tata is the grandfather, okay? And this is the page I'm gonna read to you where Tata is telling his grandchildren. Tata gets one of those serious and tender looks on his face and says, I like telling you this story because someday when you have children or grandchildren, I want you to tell it to them. This will help keep the stories of our culture from disappearing.
So beautiful.
Yes.
I think that's where I got it. I'm not taking credit for what I said earlier. I love your books and I have read them. And, you know, talking about our culture and seeing ourselves represented. But what if you're not Latino? Talk about the importance of seeing cultures that maybe aren't your culture. You know, talk about the importance of us also as Latinos expanding that knowledge and that you know, appreciation for other cultures. What can we do when it comes to diversity in books? Why is that important?
I think it's important to embrace every culture. So when we're in, let's say, a neighborhood or in a classroom and we are being introduced to other students or neighbors that are not our culture, then we can ask them, like, what do you eat on the weekends? Or do you have special holidays where you have special kinds of celebrations, and learn about them? And I think it's so important to embrace that. And it's the movie Coco, I think, brought that to life because this is based in Latino culture. However, the director who worked so closely with the Coco movie, he is Jewish. And when he began this project, I heard him talking about it. And he was saying that he remembers going to Mexico and learning about the Day of the Dead when they would light candles in front of the pictures of their loved ones who had passed away. Well, that's something in the Jewish culture that every year when it's the 1-year anniversary of the person's passing away, they light a candle. It's called a memorial candle, or in Yiddish, it's called a yahrzeit light. And so he decided to bring those ideas from what he grew up in the Jewish culture and embrace Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead, in the Latino culture.
And that's going back to one race, or, we need to embrace our similarities, also learn about our differences, but also it's good for kids to learn different perspectives, and it builds empathy, right? When you can understand somebody else's story. You mentioned Coco. Talk to us a little bit about that experience, because as I mentioned earlier, Ronnie is the co-author of the companion book to the movie Coco. Tell us a little bit about that. And I don't know if you can read a little bit about that, maybe a few parts of that story to us.
This is the book that I co-wrote with my oldest son, Aaron, and Disney invited the Disney children's editor invited me to write a story to go along with the movie once the movie was being produced. And they got to know about me through another award-winning book, which is my Tata's Remedies. And then they asked me, because they knew that I understood the culture and the language, they asked me if I would be interested in writing this story. So the name of this story is called Miguel and the Amazing Alebrijes. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Alebrijes. So Miguel in the story says, Ale what? And then the teacher says, Alebrijes. So he had never heard that word. And then the teacher explains, they are colorful sculptures of fantastical creatures, said Senora Sena. Alebrijes were invented about 100 years ago. They are a combination of ancient and modern Mexican art forms. How did they get that name? Miguel raised his hand to ask. The word alebrije came to an artist in a dream. His teacher answered, that's why there is something magical about them. And what I want to share with you all, I have some alebrijes here to show you. And of course, these are done by people who in Oaxaca who have worked on these, and that's what they do every day. They hand paint them. They're made out of wood. And you can see, like, this is an armadillo, and you can take his tail out, and there's a little hole there to put it back in. But, this is something you can do at home or at school, and you can make, like they did in Miguel and the Amazing Alebrijes, they made them out of paper mache. So you could use balloons as part of, to put your paper mache on, or you can just Google it, how to do paper mache, but it's pretty easy, just with pieces of paper, newspaper, tissue paper, and flour that you bake with, and water. And that's what you make the paste with. Then when it dries, you can sand it down, and then you can hand paint it and begin your own alebrije collection and start creating your own altar.
I notice in the book, in the back here, there are alebrijes. It looks like you can cut those out and make like a little character. It has like a little stand.
Right.
So you can put, you can, as you're reading the story to your kids, you can bring it to life, as we talked about earlier, by maybe incorporating those alebrijes, whether they make them or they use these. And also has a bunch of stickers, which kids love. Well, I just want to thank you, Ronnie, for being here today with us. I do want to mention, we do have some giveaways. Ronnie has signed some of her books, and we have a few to give away to some lucky winners. So we would love to hear from you on our social media channels on what you learned today. So if you can include the hashtag, comment hashtag today I learned, and then tell us what you learned about today's conversation. Check back on our channels, because we will be listing those winners, and then we will be able to reach you and ask you for your address so we can mail those to you. Again, they are signed copies from our very special guest, author Roni Capin Rivera-Ashford, and again, hopefully you can use all those great pieces of advice. I have them here. She said these are her, like science. You can tie science into it. You can tie culture. It's another learning opportunity for your kids, and also a really great bonding activity for you and your kids. So with that, Ronnie, do you have any last words for our audience?
I do, and I'm going to take it from my book, My Tata's Remedies, or Los Remedios de mi Tata. And what I want to ask all of you to do and to share with your children is what Tata is telling his grandson, Aaron. And he says, practice makes perfect. So if you want to be a champion bolero player, or a really good reader, or a great healer, you must practice every day. And they give each other a high five. And Aaron says, Tata, now I know what I need to do. Practice a lot what I learned from you. And so that's what I encourage all of you to do, is while you're reading with your kids, writing with your kids, sharing with in your family, if you can practice that every day or at least 3 or 4 times a week, make 10, 15 minutes to spend that amount of quality time with each other, reading, speaking with each other, writing, you will see many improvements along the spectrum of communication and learning.
Thank you, Ronnie. That was beautiful. We hope we can do this again. For all of you out there who have taken the time to join us here at Common Sense, we're so grateful, and we hope to see you again soon. Don't forget to comment for a chance to win one of Ronnie's books. For more information about Ronnie or to purchase her books, you can visit her website at butterfly